if you guys want to stop this behavior quickly, stop trying to fix the side effects and rehumanize yourself first, because I believe that if you don't honor your own humanity, it's very, very difficult to see the humanity in another person. Don, my man, I'm happy to have you here. You and I connected through referral from one of the guys in the program, which I love that, just because, I really respect a lot of the guys in my program. They're smart, driven individuals. And so usually, and they're hard to impress. So if they're impressed by their therapist, I'm always like, I got to meet this guy. Don, I always say, your family's not enough to keep you sober. Your wife's not enough to keep you sober. Shoot, I know guys who are devout in their faith and belief in God is not enough to keep them sober. But the one thing I've found that has kept them sober is the concept of legacy. And what I mean by that isn't, a lot of people think of legacy as something you're leaving your kids, a book you wrote, a nonprofit that you started. When I mean legacy, I mean the impact of your actions in your life here. To me, it's really hard for someone to look in the mirror when they are doing things that is harming humanity, that they are making, that part of the way they're living their life is actually making this place worse. And I think from a sex and porn addiction standpoint, that falls into that category. I think this is not a victimless addiction. And even if you think that it's victimless, then you're typically the victim, because the thing that you're doing is having an impact on you and your brain. I kind of want to revolve, a lot of the topics that you and I have written down here, they really revolve around legacy, impact, in terms of your existence here and how you're going to use your time going forward. And not just going forward, but I think some of the topics that we have written down are also about the impact of other people's legacy on you and how that's now impacting your legacy going forward. I think this is going to be a really cool topic of discussion, because I think thinking a little bit bigger picture when we're talking about compulsive behavior, it's in my opinion, it's the thing that unlocks the door. I think when it's purely just guilt, impact, and threats and consequences, I don't know if that's enough to keep somebody sober. But why don't you kick us off here by your kind of take and definition on that, Don?
I think you said it really well, Roland. And as I was just saying to you before we started, one of the reasons that I agreed to join the podcast is because I see what you're doing, right? You're pretty open and vulnerable about some mistakes you made, and now you're choosing to use that to help others. And in my mind, there's not a better archetype out there, right? And so some have hypothesized that there's two things that can motivate us as people: fear and love, right? And they both have their place. Fear oftentimes is part of the guilt shame pattern and so forth, and can motivate you for a while, but usually it gets you stuck. But passion, love, care for others, legacy, as you're describing, those things are sustainable. Working with combat vets, I see that time and time again, man. Like, guys come into my office and say, why should I not kill myself, right? And sometimes it's not just what they've seen, it's what they've done, and they're feeling ashamed or they're feeling stuck. And a lot of times what we're doing in therapy is helping them to make a present moment choice of what to do. They're suffering, right? They're suffering. And we're talking about what to do in that moment and what choice they need to make to use that suffering for something bigger than themselves. And it's amazing how powerful that is.
Yeah, unfortunately, within this area of compulsivity, sexual compulsivity, it is very rare. I actually had a guy in my newest group who came clean before his wife caught him, which is just rare. That is so rare. I don't see that often. But to your point, usually when we see guys in the office with this, they got caught. So they are faced. It is a very similar decision as a lot of things that are rooted in kind of guilt and shame. And the reason I bring that up, Don, is, because sexual compulsivity typically dates back to ages 12 to 15, the guilt response is long gone. I mean, they stop feeling guilt with this a long time ago. And that's typically why the addiction has progressed to wherever it is today. Right. And so, it's really hard for them oftentimes to own up to it and be honest, because the guilt's gone. And so, for a lot of these guys, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. They know they're doing it. They're still hiding it, but man, it's been around for so many decades. it's like, hey, this is kind of a fixture in my life. It'd be like a bad junk food habit or something like that, or a vaping habit or something. It's just like, I don't like it. It is what it is. But I found a way, and here's the classic lie of the sex act, right? I found a way to protect myself and protect everyone else from this. Was the belief, and then all of a sudden this whole thing happens. But I like how you phrased it and compared it to some of the combat vets of like, now that it's come out. I really appreciate you bringing that, because now that it's come out, the whole thing's evolved, right? All the stuff that you had coped with and said, oh, whatever, it was what it was, I don't need to deal with this. All of a sudden, you need to deal with it for multiple reasons. One, it's all resurfacing because all of a sudden, as you hear, a lot of my guys are married, as you hear your wife articulate back to you what you did to her, oh man, I mean, shoot, nothing hits harder than that. When she describes, I keep picturing you doing this and this and this to a woman. Man, I mean, hearing that come out of your wife's mouth after you guys just had a wonderful date at night, gosh, it just hits hard. So I think you bring up a really good point, is that's kind of where these guys are. You're now faced with what you have done. Talk to us about what you have seen when you're faced with that decision. Because, I know most guys listening to this, they are in recovery, so they have kind of chosen the path of recovery. But Don, one thing that I've noticed is just because you have said out loud or to your wife or to that you have chosen recovery, I don't know if deep down your actions would necessarily show that you have chosen recovery. I think sometimes there is sweep this under the rug or deal with this. And I talk to us about that decision, because you work with a lot of guys who are dealing with the past. And you, in my opinion, you do need to fully commit to what direction forward. You are either going to stuff this down and never think about it, and you need to fully commit if that's going to be your route, or you need to fully commit to recovery. And in my opinion, anything in between those, gosh, I don't even know what to call that. Let's just call it, it ain't going to work.
I think that's also well said, man. Like I think as humans, a lot of times our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses, right? So a lot of the guys that you're working with, these are successful guys. These are guys that know how to navigate the world, right? They know how to take control of things. Strong internal locus of control, right? Oftentimes, though, mental toughness, what you're taught as a boy sometimes, especially if you go through trauma or if you're in that competitive athletics or, competitive environments, you learn mental toughness, mind over matter, right? But another way of saying that, if you really think about it, is dissociation from your body or your feelings, right? And so that can be a real strength. And so many guys I work with, they're successful guys. They know how to navigate, sometimes manipulate the world, right? But they're not in touch with their feelings. And so what we have to do for these guys is it's like a different way forward, right? And I think you see this in your group with a lot of the vulnerability and accountability is these are guys who, rather than try to control everything, they have to let their guard down and be vulnerable for once. Open up about the real stuff, the hard stuff. That's scary, man. Oftentimes people who are struggling with addiction, they've been traumatized. They've been hurt, right? So to hear your wife say that, that's hard. And so what do you want to do? You want to shut it down and you want to go back to old behaviors, right? Medicate with other women, medicate with drugs, alcohol, whatever the addiction might be. But the way past it, right? I kind of call it the third way, if you will, is in this moment to be vulnerable, to get back in touch with your feelings, to let that hurt in, and then also start to open up and share your hurt, right? And you have to have a trusting, safe place to do that. It can be a therapist. Sometimes it can even be a friend, a pastor. It can be, like in your group, right? But for men, it's present moment accountability, letting the feelings in a little bit, and then being vulnerable themselves. And that is not easy for these guys, man. Sometimes I'll have guys like, they tell me what their favorite color is. And then at the end of the session, they'll be like, man, I don't talk to anybody like this. Like a professional athlete I work with, he was saying that to me one time, says, Doc, man, like this is deep. And I'm like, man, like we haven't talked about anything yet. Right. But it was just because he was so used to maintaining a certain image, a persona, the discipline, and not able to be vulnerable as well.
It's a, this is a process addiction. I remind guys all the time. I really do. I think you're going to fail. If you look at this as a sex or a porn addiction, you are going to fail and you're going to relapse, or you're just frankly never going to truly get sober, truly get recovered. you'll find a way to not do this stuff for a year or two just so you don't ruin your life. But in the end, most of these guys still want to, even though they're not doing it. Right. And again, that's dangerous territory. It's how you hear the stories of the guys relapsing 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. But to me, their primary process, at least the guys in my group, their primary process addiction is let's I wouldn't even say let's make it about success, because I think their success in business and their success in life, charisma, just their persona that they've created for others, their success, it comes from their primary process addiction, which I believe is hearing positive stories about themselves that they like. Another way to word that for you guys who don't like the phrase stories, let's call them thoughts, right? So when we do something out in the world and someone says, "Hey, oh my gosh, man, nice car," you say, "Hey, thanks, kid." You get in your car, you drive home. There's a belief in your head that you may have validated at that time, which was, yeah, you know what? I finally made it. I used to be a kid like that, and I was poor and wanted to be successful. And now look at me. I'm one of the successful guys that I used, right? So you tell yourself that story in your head, and you smile and you drive home all feeling all great about yourself, right? So I really do, for at least, again, I can only speak to the guys in my program. A lot of them are not as addicted to sex and pornography as this industry likes to paint them out to be. A lot of it is they love hearing amazing stories about themselves, and they do things that validate those stories, and then they avoid things that unvalidate those stories. I bring this up for two reasons. One, watch a lot of your sexual stuff. A lot of it is, it's chasing. For my guys, it's chasing. They want to be lusted after. They want to be desired. They want to be admired. I mean, shoot, I know a lot of guys who are married to I hate objectifying a woman with numbers like this because it sounds so gross, but it just serves my argument better.
Mm-hmm.
Their wife's a 10. And they're sleeping with a 6 because they want the 5 or the 6 to be like, man, he was so amazing. He was the best I ever had. She'll compare you to every guy she's with forever. And a lot of my guys are disgusted with themselves because they're doing this. Their affair partners or cheating partners are nothing, even can't even hold a candle to the beauty and how amazing their wife is. But again, it validates the story. I'm blowing her world. I made her orgasm 3 times every time I'm over at her house, right? It's this empowering story that we like. So it's not a sex addiction. It's you chasing amazing stories. And the second reason I bring that up is you can also engage in these behaviors to avoid the negative ones, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
if you have a bunch of stories that day, that month, I'm old, I'm wrinkly, I'm fat, I'm falling behind, 3 of my businesses are not profitable right now. If you're in that time of not feeling so awesome, you will now pursue something either to A, just avoid, or B, what could I do to hear a positive story? One thing I hate sharing because I'm embarrassed about it is I would go to Vegas and blow a bunch of money on a, and I don't know, for those of you listening to the call who have got a table at Vegas, but if you get a nice table at Vegas, you're dropping probably 80 or 90K that night. Sometimes over 100,000. But you do it, and the women, they want free drinks, and next thing you know, your table's full of all these gorgeous women. But again, you know why I did it, Don? I did it because I did it for the guys in the room. I did it so they could know, that's right, I got the front center table. It is full of gorgeous women. I'm better than you. I made it. You all wish you could be me. And anytime I hate saying this, but in hindsight, this was what I was doing. Anytime I was kind of doubting how awesome I was, I just book a trip, go down there, and get that hit. But here's the sad part, Don. I didn't even have to land on the plane back home for all of that to be gone and tank all the way being back down to empty. And I'm saying all this in hindsight now, but that's really what I'm talking about. These guys, their process addiction oftentimes is chasing awesome stories that make them feel like they've made it and avoiding stories that make them feel like they haven't.
Right. And I think you're showing some insight there into the shadow, right? Like the stronger the shame gets, the more you have that kind of dark side of yourself, or, where you're manipulating or conniving, the stronger that gets, the stronger the addictive behavior gets, because the more you need that dopamine hit, right? And it is a process addiction. And it's not the sex itself, it's all the things that come along with admiration and things like that. Because the more ashamed you feel, what do you need, right? You need to feel good about yourself. Well, let me put up the false self. Let me put up the image. Let me put up that public self, that gets me that attention. And that's a great feeling, but it lasts, not very long, right? And then you have to go back and look in the mirror and know your truest self. And so what we really want to do in therapy, oftentimes in my mind, good therapy, is integrating the ego and the shadow.
Yes.
Okay. So, some of these elements of yourself, like if you can command a crowd and you can be charismatic and you can own a table or you can be successful in business, good for you. Those aren't bad things, right? We don't want to eliminate the ego, but we have to try to get you to integrate all elements of yourself.
Yes.
And men don't know it's safe to do that, right? Most guys who engage in this, like there's always trauma there, Roland. There's always trauma there. There's ways in which you learned as a youngster, man, that the world isn't safe, right? And that if you do open up about these parts of yourself, you're going to get stung, right? So what do? You lock down and control, and the addiction persists.
Well, I'd say I want to, sorry to interrupt, but I want to speak. You said something brilliant there, right? These things aren't inherently bad. There is nothing wrong with if you are a single guy and you're telling, or you're a married guy and you're telling your wife, "Hey, honey, I'm going to Vegas. I am going to go to this concert. There will be women at my table. I am not going to sleep with them or flirt with them." So as long as you're being honest, but there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to socialize and enjoy yourself and spend your money. I mean, if you've got the money to spend and you're not harming yourself, your future, or your family's financial future, by all means, spend it. Enjoy the social fun aspects of life. Again, nothing inherently wrong with it. Where it's inherently wrong was two things for me. And again, I like to speak to my story because, Don, I've never been any of these other guys. And so I don't like to project and assume things. For me, there was kind of two things going on there. One, I was not enjoying, now that I know it, for those guys who are interested, you can look up, there's a lot of studies around the difference between liking versus wanting, right? Wanting being dopaminergic and liking being, all these other beautiful, amazing, neurotransmitters, hormones, these just really feelings, and those highs last a long time. But, my point is, it was not a liking thing when I was there. It was dopaminergic. My eyes were constantly scanning, how hot are these women? Are these hot enough to impress the guys? And then my eyes were constantly scanning the room. How many guys wish they were me right now? I mean, there was no joy occurring. I mean, it was simply, am I living up to the thing that I wanted to accomplish? And the only measure was, how good do I look? And then the second piece there that I wanted to speak to was, I didn't want anyone to know how pathetic my game was. I didn't tell my best friends that was what I was doing. I didn't tell a soul that I was there to put on a performance, because I was, to be honest, Don, I was ashamed at how childish that was. And I knew it deep down. I think I lied to myself and tried to tell myself that it was for something different. But I mean, come on, you can't lie to yourself. If you're engaging in childish behaviors that are immature and pathetic, come on, man, there's no escape.
Well, this is what I like about you, Roland. This is what I like about you, is that you can be vulnerable and you can open up about this stuff. And listen, like in public now, that's impressive to me. Okay. Right. And you're right. Like, hurt people, man. At that point in time, right, when you're at that table and you're kind of, you're getting that dopamine hit, you're objectifying humans, a lot of humans, right? But there's a part of you that always knows it, right? You're there and you're objectifying others in the room and not seeing them as people.
Well, not only that, but think about this. You know why I was doing that? Because other men did that to me when I was poor and I was on the dance floor, crowded in like a bunch of sardines, like that. Exactly what you said. I was now hurting the young men in the room, showing, you guys will never be with attractive women. You will never be an admired, respected. You will always be mediocre at average unless you get money and hot women to like you. And I appreciate you bringing that up. A lot of these guys do think that their actions are victimless. Guys, it is very rare that if you're doing something that violates sound psychology and basic human needs, anytime you're acting out of that, somebody's paying the price for it. And John, I really appreciate you bringing that up. I don't think I've let that in. That was kind of that legacy piece that you talked about. I really, Don, I don't think anyone's ever told me that. I know that now because I know I have feelings towards the Grant Cardones of the world and the wealth shaming culture out there that basically say, guys, you're nothing unless you get to, this echelon. And that really harmed me because I had to abandon my true self. Because Don, I am not an entrepreneur. I don't like to work. I don't even particularly really care about money. There's, this is a conversation for a different day, but there's something else that really deeply fulfills me. And I've known that as a boy, but I had to throw that piece away because I looked around in the capitalist society that we lived in and I was like, there's no room for a highly sensitive, grounded, loving, connected person in this world. So I had to essentially abandon him, kill him off in favor for this thing that, I looked around and assessed the world. So it's not, and here's the thing, Don, it's not that hard to do. Just look around. What is the message? The message is buy nice shit, look good, save money, make money, spend money, and everyone will like you. And if you're not there yet, you better be working your ass off to get to that point if you ever want to be somebody. Yeah. And I really appreciate you telling me that. It's hard to hear because I am now the abuser of all those young men in the room who were vulnerable and felt like they had unmet needs. And now I set a bad example for them. And if any of them are listening, I want to apologize. And I hope I didn't cause you too much pain.
Man, I love your humility there, right? Like in you, and Roland and the women at the time too, right? We'll say that, like some of those women were vulnerable to you. Right?
I was using them. I was using them for my agenda. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, the women as well. But a true strong man, like you and I were talking, we were rapping on the phone a little bit about like modern masculinity, and I'm like, I think we failed men in a lot of ways where we haven't we really haven't defined modern masculinity, what it should look like. And I think some elements of traditional masculinity have been harmful to not only to women, but to men. But a modern masculinity in my mind is somebody who can look in the mirror and own their shit, man. Right. Like where you look in the mirror and you say, I fucked up. I harmed somebody. And then owning that and committing to do better. Right. And that takes ego strength, right. Where you can recognize and where you can recognize, that hurt people, that you're just a human. You don't need to be superhuman. And, my observation of addicts over time, man, and this is some of the best people on earth. They actually are that at some point in time, they were that little boy that was so sensitive and really cared a lot and loved, they had to shut that down in order to compete, in order to put forward the false self, which society will reward the hell out of it. I got my kid right now. I'm super proud of him. I got 2 boys. I'm really proud of them. Right. My oldest is looking at the academy and everything. And I love that for him. He's a high achiever. Right. But I also recognize, I know what can happen. Right.
Yeah.
And they will reward the false self, not necessarily the true self. And he's a great kid like you, and so, man, like I said, what you're doing right there, where you're able to hold a little bit of that pain and then try to use it for something good. That's the way, man. That's the way.
Well, Don, so one thing I believe is that this addiction plagues high achieving men because they had to dehumanize themselves to get to where they are today in the United States in 2024. They had to dehumanize themselves to get to where they are. And then once you dehumanize yourself, this is just how psychology works. The second that you no longer value humanity, you don't see its place in this world, it opens the door to a lot of other things that devalue humanity. And one of those, especially in our culture, is sex and sexuality. These are people. And the second that you are like, oh, well, this world's really not about people. This world is just about, performing and getting as many of your ducks in a row as possible before your days are done. That's kind of the what's taught to us from a capitalistic standpoint. But I think for me, that was where things really, really, really got bad. When I stopped honoring my humanity, and again, guys, for everybody listening, when I say your humanity, I mean what do we know about humans? We know they have needs. We know they have motives. And we know that we experience emotions on the flip side as to how well, this is my opinion, as to how well we are honoring those needs and motives. And I think if you're dishonoring them, your life is full of unpleasant and negative emotions. And I think the more you honor your needs and motives, you are rewarded with positive emotions. It's what I believe emotions do. They're telling you how hot or cold you are. It's why your therapist isn't trying to be annoying when they tell you, how does that make you feel, or what feeling came up. They're trying to help you access arguably the easiest thing that you can tap into on a day-to-day basis that will tell you how hot or cold you are. But my point on is, I threw away all of that. I turned myself. And so what I mean by dehumanization is I turned myself, rather than a human with needs, motives, feelings, I turned myself into a production machine. How many people can I get to like me? How many people can I get to trust me so that they give me their money? How many people can I get to be impressed by me? How many people can I get to respect me? How many, I dehumanized the human in me, and I turned myself into essentially a contest. How many of all these categories can I get? How big can I get my muscles? How big can I get my bank account? How many countries can I visit? I mean, it's just, you name it. I just, what impresses people? Okay, cool. I'll add that to the list, and I'll see how high I can get things in that list. But the crescendo I want to strike there is, guys, when you dehumanize yourself, you dehumanize others. My guess is, for the parents out there, you are probably dehumanizing your kids by accident. You telling your kid to go become someone successful is none of your fucking business. That's you trying to rip the human out of him and start to hijack his life. I know better than you. If you want to be happy, you need to do these things. And again, every comment like that, you're making him less and less. You're making him trust his humanity less and less and less and less and less, and buy into your story. And, if you guys aren't careful, and again, it's not all parents' fault. It's also masculine culture, advertising, Jay-Z, when he does a music video, he's not in an average home. He's in his house, and there's women in his hot tub, and they're not ugly. So, there's a lot of factors at play. It's not just parents. But my point is, every time we shove things down men, especially successful men, men driven who want to be successful, every time you do that, you make them trust themselves less and buy into the story more. And I see it time and time again. But the crescendo I want to strike is, if you guys want to stop this behavior quickly, stop trying to fix the side effects and rehumanize yourself first. Because I believe, and I'd love for you to speak to this, Don, I believe that if you don't honor your own humanity, it's very, very difficult to see the humanity in another person.
I can tell you've done your work. This is one thing I tell a lot of my successful male clients. The mental toughness they learned as a kid, right? Like the way that they learned to shut up and color, do what needs to be done, right? In order to make the world accept you. Mm-hmm. Another word for that is basically dissociating from your body and your feelings and your needs, mm-hmm. right? And I understand the world can be a tough place, right? And we do need to somehow prepare our kids how to survive in that world. Mm-hmm. But I really liked what you said is, that comes at a cost, right? In exchange for being in touch with their true selves. So, I annoyed the hell out of both my boys. They got a feeling wheel in their stocking at Christmas. And they're like, oh God, it sucks to have a psychologist as a dad, right? But I say to them, like, listen, feelings, I want you to be in touch with those. Why? Not because I just want to be an annoying dad. Like, how do you feel? That mm-hmm. stuff. But it's because feelings guide you to what you need. Mm-hmm. They teach you about yourself. And in therapy, hang on to this one, man. Like, people need to change themselves much less than they need to know themselves. Yeah. They need to know themselves. You need to know what kind of tree you are, man. If you're a pine tree, you got to know you're a pine. If you're a maple, you got to know you're a maple, right? And there's beauty to each type of tree, but you got to know which one you are, because it tells you what type of soil you need, what climate you exist best in. So people need to know themselves, get in touch with their feelings, right? And so you also brought out a really important point, is that when you're out of touch with that yourself, you're out of touch with others, right? Like when your wife can tell you how devastated she is, right? And you just shut that shit down and you go back to your behavior, right? You're out of touch. You're not really letting it in. And that's because you haven't been able to do that with your own
Yeah.
self. Right. So we need, and there is no time like the present to heal men, right? Because especially men in powerful positions, Roland, like a guy in a powerful position, right? Like with privilege comes responsibility. Some of the guys in your group, man, are privileged guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they need healing. And, they'll be amazed. Not only will they be happier, but more fulfilled, but they'll be amazed at how the others in their life flourish as well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, have you read Elaine Aron's Highly Sensitive Person book? Have you read that? She had a successor who she taught and trained and worked with named Tim. I can't remember his name, but for anybody listening, if you have an Audible account or subscription, both Elaine's Highly Sensitive Person book is free to listen to, and Tim's Highly Sensitive Boy. It's targeted more towards like parenting, but it's really therapeutic for us guys to read that book, because you can kind of spot what didn't happen for you when you were young. But the reason I bring this up is it's interesting. I can't remember the percentage. Elaine says it in the beginning of her book, but it's something like 38%. So 38% of the population are classified as a highly sensitive person. But then here's the interesting piece. 97% of high achievers are highly sensitive. So only 38% of the population, but basically almost all high achievers are highly sensitive. Now, I just want to clarify this when I say this, because a lot of guys demonize that word and they don't want to be highly sensitive. Mm-hmm. Here's how she describes it. If you were to do like an MRI and look at these two people, there's no difference. They're actually not highly sensitive in the way that you're probably thinking. They think about things and internalize things 10 times more than the normal person. So you're not highly sensitive in the sense that you're a sissy and a wuss. You're highly sensitive in the sense that when someone criticizes you and says, "Oh, I don't like that haircut," you will think about that statement 10 to 20 times more than someone else, and you will apply it to, "Oh shoot, well, I need to go find a barber. I need to go start asking people who I think have good hair, who cuts their hair. How many days before this event should I get my hair cut? Does it look great when it's fresh? Does it look good when it's 2 days?" Right. All of a sudden, you're just extrapolating all this data. Yeah. But I bring that up because you for these guys, I think reading those books and really understanding how you killing off your sensitivity, the harm that could cause you, right? Because you demonizing it and terminating it into something you don't want to be, to me, it prevents, my opinion, John, it prevents you from tapping into your humanity again. Because at least for me, I made a decision at 8. There is no place for a boy as sensitive as me. And so I was just like, I'm not going there. And it was very difficult because therapists would see it. And they kept saying, "Oh, what would you say to that little boy?" I'm like, "Oh, don't fucking make me do that make-believe exercise." And they would always kind of, "What do you do?" But you know what? I got to give them credit, Don, because now deep into my recovery and trying to wake up that side of me, because my wife deserves it. I deserve it. My clients deserve it. God, it's hard because it's, I've just turned him into the enemy. I was like, you know what? No one liked you. You were always sad. You were shy. You had to quit karate because the noise in the room of everybody screaming was too loud. You wanted to be a fireman, but we had to leave the parade because they started honking the horns and you didn't like the sound of the horn. Like, there's no place for someone like you. And so, man, it was, but here's the thing. We know that we were born perfectly the way that we were supposed to be. And so think about how sad that would be if there's nothing about you from ages 0 to 10 that you like or want to be or remember or even care to remember. Man, what a bummer that would be, because essentially what you're saying is I don't want my true self. I want everything that I have fabricated. And the problem with that is, and for the guys listening, you've probably fabricated someone who thrives well in the United States in 2024. So I can see why you guys don't are more partial to that. But again, here's the challenge. When you fabricate something, you have to make a choice. I am picking to believe this thing. And the challenge with that is how do you know it's true? How do you know that one person's advice is true? Did they tell you the long-term consequences of believing something like that? Did they tell you the pros and cons? Typically, no. You just looked at that guy and it's like, oh, well, he's on stage. Everybody likes him. He's rich. I like his car. I'm going to believe what he believes.
Right.
And there was no other discussions about it. And the next thing you know, you become a sausage of everyone else's beliefs. And here's the thing I want to bring up for the guys listening, because they're struggling with sexual compulsive behavior. Here's the problem with that sausage of impressive awesomeness. I promise you this, as you start cut that sausage open, you start digging through all those beliefs, I cannot tell you how baffled you are going to be at how many of them directly conflict with each other. You cannot be an amazing father and a man of integrity and bang a bunch of 23-year-old women when you're on your conference in Vegas. You see what I'm saying? It's just, if you value the attention from these young women and the sex with them, that directly conflicts with your contract that you signed with your wife and the way your kids think of you. So I mean, again, and that's just one example. When you dig through that sausage, especially as a high achieving male in this country, you're going to be disgusted at how many conflict, but at the same time, you're also going to be at peace because you'll start to realize, okay, I'm not a fuck up. I'm not a bad person. I've just been blindly buying into a lot of nonsense and not even second guessing if it's even going to be able to work. Right. I think that's where recovery begins. It's like, dude, you got to go back through that thing and sift through and make a choice, because the truth is you can't bang a 23-year-old prostitute in Vegas and honor and be a kick-ass husband. You just can't. You need to decide which of the two feels the truest to you. And I think these guys just haven't sat with those beliefs long enough to make the decision, because I think right now, for most guys listening, if I asked you which one of those is going to lead to the fulfilling life that you want, come on, you guys wouldn't have to even hesitate. You pick the kick-ass husband every time. And I know it sounds like it goes without saying, but it really doesn't go without saying, because if we look at where most of you guys are listening to this, it's probably something you should have thought about a long time ago.
Yes. The incongruence, right? And oftentimes, again, I think, talking to your group of high achievers, your guys are doers. I think I mentioned this to you when we were, again, talking before, but I worked with one of the national experts in ADHD. We sat down, we had a conversation one time, and he said, "Oh, you're working with athletes, you're working with combat vets, you're working with high achievers." He said, "You're working with ADHD all over the place." Okay. And I'm not throwing out the diagnosis, I don't even know if ADHD is a quote disorder, but I think it's a certain type of way of being in the world. Sure. And a lot of the guys I work with, they're doers, man. They're on the move. They're going, right? And that's okay. But if you don't slow down and reflect, you don't get in touch with your body, you don't think about the different incongruencies in your life, right? You're a prisoner.
Have you ever heard of Jason Van Ruler? He's becoming progressively more popular. He came and spoke to all of our guys last week, and he presented this board of directors concept that men need. He said, one thing that's changed in the in the internet era is it used to be your circle was pretty small in terms of like people that you kind of knew, like 200 people, right? And you had mentors. You could speak to these people. You might even have their phone number, or your parents had their phone number, right? So that's how it was. You kind of knew people, and the number wasn't that big. And you kind of saw them walk the walk. That was how you made your decision about who this individual is. And Jason brought up this interesting point, right? In the internet era where you only see what someone wants you to see, and you've never met this person ever, and you probably never will. These now have become our mentors. And so he presented this concept, and the reason I bring it up is you were talking about go, nothing wrong with it. There isn't. Come on, guys, everybody listening, you guys are all systems guys. All you guys like systems. If I want a six-pack, what system do I need to follow to get the six-pack? If I want to achieve this financial benchmark, what's the system that gets me there in the quickest way? What Don was just saying there was, there's nothing wrong with go, but do you have a system and people in your life? That's why my groups we operate in these groups of 10, is do you have people in your life to double check your go? Right. Because again, if you're just, I appreciate the execute, but have you double checked the things that you're executing on to make sure that this is going to go the distance? And I think that was kind of what we lost kind of post 1990s, when your mentors were now these people who you've never met who are choosing only the positive things in their lives to show you. A lot of these guys, Google all these mentors that you guys worship. A lot of them are on their 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th marriage. And if you really want to look into some of the stuff, I mean, there's stuff that they're not telling you that's actually been published out there. And I'm not going to name the names because I don't like to talk about people because I haven't verified any of these things. But these guys that a lot of us are worshiping, their personal life is a fucking disaster. And so you got to be careful just blindly executing on these guys' advice, because you don't know where that takes you in the other categories, right? Does that make sense, Don?
I think that makes perfect sense, right? Everybody's able to put their ego out there, the things they want people to see, but we don't get a full window into their lives. And balance is the most important word in mental health, man. Balance, right?
Right.
And a lot of times people's lives are out of balance. Everything in life is a trade-off. Everything, there's a book out there called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Life.
I love that book. It's a great book.
You know that book. Okay, right? What do you say yes to and what do you say no to, right? Because everything's a trade-off, man. And so, yeah, people's lives are out of balance, but you'd never know it. You'd never know it. And so that, in my mind, you have to, the same way a skeleton holds up a body, right? Your routine, your process, as you described it, will hold up your life. And so you do need a process in place that's where accountability is built in, right? And also where there's some reflection. The healthiest people in my mind are, every day is a mix of action and contemplation, and there's a back and forth. So, when I tell guys, like, one of the healthiest routines I can tell somebody to put into their day is to take a little bit of time where you sit, you're still, right? You might read some wisdom literature, you might meditate, or where, you're having honest conversation with a therapist, a friend, a pastor, whoever it is, right? But where you slow down enough to where you're no longer acting compulsively without self-awareness, right? What you described there was so important because someone slowed you down at some point, Roland, right? And it was your therapist where you started to see those incongruencies and they made you look at it. They mirrored you appropriately, right? Good mirroring is necessary for young men. People who were fortunate enough to have a father who could both hold them accountable and really love them and really see them, okay? That helps. Sometimes it's still not enough, but it helps. Many guys are running around looking for that and looking in the wrong place.
My mantra when my sex addiction and just when things really got out of control, it's again, I was such a, in hindsight, I was such a pathetic individual. I went to this bar in Washington, D.C.
Can I stop you there for a sec, man? I know you're just talking. I know you engaged in some maybe pathetic or shameful behavior.
Yes,
you were
correct.
never a pathetic individual. And I know, here's the therapist coming.
Correct.
You got to always separate behavior.
And I appreciate you saying that, because all of my therapists, especially through the sex addiction recovery, have all said, "Hey, be very, very careful what you keep calling your past behavior, because it's not going to help. Calling it things is only going to make it worse, and maybe." It's just going to complicate things. But yeah, I went to this bar and there was this sign and it kind of became my mantra. I remember looking at it and smiling. I was at this bar alone. I went to a lot of bars alone as a sex addict, unfortunately. But I was looking up at it and I remember smiling, and I'm not sure why. I'm sad that it made me happy, but it became my mantra. The sign said, it was this like billionaire guy who owned the bar. It was this big sign that said, "All I ever wanted was everything." And I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, that's my mantra. And it's sad, but that just really changed me. I stopped saying no to anything and said yes to anything awesome. Anything awesome that looked like fun and exciting, I just said yes to, because it was like, my mantra is, I even put it on the back of my phone screen. All I ever wanted was everything. Then I read a book post-pandemic by Oliver Burkeman. It's in my top 3. It's called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. It's a brilliant book. Brilliant.
Write it down, man.
I know it sounds like a business book. It's not. It's a bait and switch. He gets you to buy it for time management, and then he basically tells you time management's BS. And essentially, all I wanted was everything, and all these coaches and mentors and influencers telling you that you can have it all. That's just not true. And one thing he says in the book that I love is he's like, FOMO is BS. He goes, anytime you're in Dubai, you can't be in Fiji. Anytime he's like, you are always missing out because you can only do the thing that you're doing. And so he said, FOMO, he's like, if you guys are suffering from FOMO, you got to figure that out, because he's like, anytime you make a choice, you're saying no to 17 billion other things that you can't say yes to, because in order to be in Fiji, you can't be in Dubai. It just, they conflict with each other. Right. And I love that book because it was like, that was kind of my wake up call. Was all I ever wanted was anything as a broken mantra, because my poor wife or anybody else who is counting on me to make this decision, if I'm presented with another one, I feel, I'm going to, with that mantra, I'm going to pick it because it's awesome and because it's my mantra. And now that I'm now that I'm trying to learn what integrity was, because to be completely honest with you, Don, I don't think I've ever had integrity because of my, I was raised in a Mormon family, and I've been lying my whole life about everything. And so I don't know if I forgot integrity a long time ago. So I'm still trying to learn what that is. But, my best definition of it is it's a commitment to a single truth, and I don't bend that truth because it's the truth. And so you're at a point where it's like, I'm not going to bend this to be convenient, because that would make me violate these other truths that I have committed to. Does that make, and so that's what that's the beauty of what this unfortunate, sex addiction recovery has taught me. Was it's not about stopping stuff. The guys who try to stop stuff don't end up ever stopping it. It's about you deciding what is true for you and creating a plan and a lifestyle to be able to commit to that. That's what we do in our groups. People always ask, I go, what my program really is? I go, it's a truth-seeking program. We literally come together in a mastermind format, and we talk about the things that we want, the things that we think bring us pleasure, and we together call each other out and debunk. I got one guy who's recently divorced, and he's like, I don't know if I like monogamy. I think I want to just enjoy many sexual partners. And so as a group, we said, cool, let's test all of that for which one's actually fulfilling. I'm not going to spoiler. I'm not going to tell you which one ended up being more aligned with his truth, but let's just say, nothing brought him more joy than when he was with his person who will no longer speak to him now because of what he did to her. And when we compared those two truths, one just, oh my gosh, it was hard to get wins in this other category compared to the other wins that he had when he was in his, amazing connected relationship with his soulmate. So, that's the last thing I want you to speak to. Is I always try to end with some sort of like action, man. If you had to give these guys something to freaking do, these guys, they're doers. They want to, you can't do being, but at the same time with my guys, you got to help them do being, because being is something that is very hard to just do for them. So if you could help them do being, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to think on that for just a second here, because I want to leave one parting word of wisdom.
Yeah, go for it.
And it's a doing. It would be lean into your vulnerability, right? Face your fear, open up, and talk about the real stuff. You want a compass? Find someone to talk to about the hardest stuff to talk about, right? What you're most ashamed of, open up and talk about it. Take the risk. You might have to face some hard consequences, okay? But I promise you, in the long run, you'll experience joy, as opposed to just pleasure, joy. Right. And that might mean going through a dark period, right, where you face that you've hurt somebody. And but I promise you start on that path of vulnerability, opening up, being real, you will never regret it. You will never regret it. Everybody.
And I love that advice. And the thing that I would say to everybody listening to that is, I know that can sometimes sound a little like fluffy. And here's the thing: if his advice sounded fluffy and unactionable, it's probably because you don't have enough ammunition to be vulnerable and go there yet. All the stuff you guys heard me kind of embarrassingly share to Don about things that I did and mentalities that I had, I got from going to peer groups and therapists and hearing about things that people do to get their needs met. And so being in a room of hearing faulty plans, and it starts to allow you to go, oh shoot, I do that. And I've done that before too. And so a lot of it is, for the guys listening are like, oh, that's fine, Don, but how do you do that? That's a great question. It's a valid question because, if you've bought into the delusion so hard that you're not even quite sure what isn't being said that needs to be said, then I would just start there.
Start there.
Connect with an amazing therapist, find a men's group to be a part of, but it is really hard. One of my big things that I say in my book is it's hard to recover when you don't know what you're recovering from. And everything that I said, like all these things that were driving my compulsive behavior, I didn't know any of those things until I knew them. And I could not recover until they were uncovered. Right. Don, what if somebody loves your message? Well, I know they're going to, because this was just such a freaking killer podcast. If somebody wants to find you, find your practice, is there a website? Where are you licensed? What would the next steps for that be?
Yeah, thank you. I am, so I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist in Michigan, and my practice is Integrative Psychology of Ann Arbor. We have a website, integrativea2.com, and people can contact us there. And anybody can drop me an email if anybody has questions about different things. Sometimes overseeing a clinic, and I have a pretty full caseload, so sometimes I can't take somebody on, but I will always return your phone call, and we can have a conversation. And if I can't help you, I will make sure that I link you up with somebody who can. And I'm pretty well connected in the community here with a lot of therapists who are talented and help people. So really just appreciate you having me on the show. Thank you for your honesty and humility and talking about things, Roland. And I wish you the best of luck on your journey, man. I think you're helping people out there, and I respect that you had me on to just be a part of that. So humbled by it.
Yeah, this was awesome. I mean, this is definitely up there. I won't say it was the best episode on the show because I have forgotten some of my early ones, but I mean, this was very helpful. And I know just definitely some of the things you said spoke to me. And usually when they speak to me, they speak to my audience, because me and my guys are kind of the same. So I appreciate you, Don. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate you.